Hello world of YouTube, and welcome to another episode of Redacted, the show where every album has a story. This week's episode was originally going to be November's episode, and I'm still going to drop a second episode in December to be December's official episode, because the reason why this never came out is post-wedding, like I've discussed in Resident Evil. I just kind of been in a weird, this post-euphoric haze where like we had all this planning and setup, and to see it execute so well was nice, but then I kind of needed a little more mental detox time that I had originally kind of set aside for myself anyway. So I'm going to spend December sort of doing some catch up from November, at least in the instance of this, but also just do some other fun things throughout the month to sort of send the year off into the horizons, you know, bring together some ideas that I've kind of been stewing with for a minute. And this Redacted, I was going to do this year as like a penultimate episode because it's another trilogy piece. It's another look at 3 records that are supposed to have a unifying force, but the records themselves, even though they have a pretty, you know, in-depth artful setup, feel so fumbled on execution that I figured I'd try my best to rein some of that. A project that still retains a lot of the mentality and creative energy that seemed to go into all 3 of these projects, but make a smoother listening experience out of it all, sort of the heart of this show. It's a trilogy that started in 2019 and seemingly was going to be like a yearly thing, but because of 2020, the 3rd part was delayed, and it leaves this trilogy feeling so awkward upon spinning in full. It is the 3-piece trilogy of Complaint, Placement, Intention by Watsky that I'm going to pull into a listening experience with the name Complaint, Placement, Intention.
You say that you believe that.
While I haven't done a Watsky discography review, I'm kind of glad I've sat with these 3 records in particular in his catalog, because while I thought they've all been relatively solid upon release, the longer that they've sat in my mind, I find myself liking them collectively less and less. Not to say that sonically they don't feel super cohesive. I know in the teaser I kind of talked a bit about the concept not quite coming together and kind of putting that on sort of the way the world evolved at the genesis of this trilogy's inception. But Watsky really tried to run the gambit with this in this vague conceptual manner. It's clear that there's like a through line he wanted to tell, and if anything, some of those through lines got more enhanced with the turning of the decade. But I still think that because there was such time between the beginnings and endings of this trilogy, and even how some of the sounds across these 3 projects evolved, they don't wholly feel like a unified trilogy. Sure, some of the sonic ideas sort of revolve around each other because they are all Watsky projects, and I think that like the sort of planting and payoff moments in some of the songwriting, some turns of phrase come back up that I think act as nice little eggs to find upon the listening experience. You know, some of them tie into the theme, some of them tie into the attitude that sort of evolves across the trilogy, and I use to sort of restructure the use of mood across the trilogy, especially when it comes to like the dynamic across the back and forth in the lyrics and the worldview mood that definitely is one of the components that gets morphed at least a little bit across Intention, in my opinion. This is also the type of project that I feel like if one were to dive into them as 3 bodies of work, they could find themselves pulling away different highlights than I had, because Watsky does do some sonic pivots on here that, by and large, outside of some select instances to be a sonic pivot, go far enough into genres that I don't think Watsky just does all that well sometimes. I just know that if somebody were to spin this Redacted after spinning the records in full, they could see some issue with the lack of some of the ideas sonically that he does on here, and I would totally understand that. While Again, I haven't ranked Watsy's discography. I have gone back and forth on where these records would place because I think each one would place in different parts of his proverbial discography ranking, and that may show with what songs I kept from each individual record. I will say Intention has the most showing. I do have equal showing of Complaint and Placement, and that was partially because those stylistic pivots that lie on those two records are some of the moments that I come back to less and less on those releases. Either way, all of the preamble aside and the setup to what my vision for this Redacted is, let's go over the track listing. My version of Complaint, Placement, and Intention is 1 hour and 4 minutes and 18 songs. Let's go ahead and talk about the track listing track by track after showing you the track listing now.
Gotta make it look easy. Dash my plan, then burn EF and G and F and G. I'm still stuck on the right path, my plans lead, so I had to give her first names like. Tell me what's the move. We got to move. I want you, boo. You want me too. If you got ass, then we're rolling. Can't stop us rolling down the hill. Feel fucked up. Does it feel fucked up? I'd be real dumb if I seemed super. Sound found religion, the rhythm, giving the division. It's the bad when nothing is clicking, but it's okay. We come up, protect, instruct in it. The structure give us some significance. Thus, each coincidence, you'll find my fingerprints. Coming in strong. If you're not angry, what the fuck's wrong with ya? I'd rather be a lover than I get stuck in it. Just come undone mentally. Silly little petty human brain with my petty pain, really trying to shackle me with vain. Think it's time that I end it all. So I stall, trying to not let you end the call. Cause as long as you're here, my red flags with my white flags, and now all my laundry's pink. I'm petty at best, someone to pity at worst. Putty and oh shoot, I'm back in action, dripping different like I'm Oju. You know what, with my battalion, how about we packed it till 4, then you get the fuck out the door. Can I be happy? Coming from a mile away. The microphone eaters, the gimmies, the maybe next years. Knees capsizing and the sea keeps rising and my kneecaps start to shake. If I can't sing the show, every part of my soul, oh my god, I fear it. I don't know what I want, but I know you don't deserve this shit. Cause hello, 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 hello. It's a motherfucking pleasure.
All three beginnings to these projects lie within this Redacted. They just crop up at different points. Placement and Intentions are back-to-back in the track listing. They're what open this, and it's because one is to be a prologue of sorts, Advanced Placement, before the album really kind of starts going with The Place Is a Mess, What's the Move, and Rollin. 3 tracks from Intention that more feel like the meat and potatoes of the project, mood-wise to some degree, and sort of attitude that permeates. Because while that dreadfulness that permeates throughout Advanced Placement does crop up, there is an airy poppiness that still also cuts through that track. And also, it's one of those songs with a sort of planting payoff, lyrical nod. It's a sort of nice, catchy, softer intro before the party really gets started. The Plan Is a Mess honestly became the mission statement for me when pulling this together, because these records ultimately, when trying to tie them together, get a little messy. There's a way to do it, but there's definitely a chaotic approach that I feel like one has to take, and this is where I feel like that attitude the record really sits with lies in. There is a sense of euphoria seen lost in the madness, and there's an attempt at a reaching euphoria amidst the madness that I think Watsky tries to tap into on here, that also just kind of helps carry that amped up energy and just adds a little more energy beneath where one might be feeling at the end of Advanced Placement. And in that song, he also introduces this band, which again, the atmosphere of Intention by feeling like a jam with a band is part of the reason also why there's more of it on here, because it adds to that sort of sense of ennui felt on, trying to push past the chaos and acceptance of the world as it has evolved to. And What's the Move follows that, partially because in Intention, They sit next to each other, and it's one of those, I'm going to make an intro bleed into the second song, banger move that I think works a lot of the time in albums for me personally. It's fun collaboration with T-Pain. That's another catchy, more lively sounding jam. You could also kind of see it as the meeting point of the two pieces of the main conversation that especially happens throughout the albums, or at least my version of these albums end. And those three songs are the sort of strong, energetic, Watsky-esque opening that I wanted to have sort of start the record off strong. It's a nice little three-hit combo of sorts, before throwing it into a small pivot with the still catchy, hook-driven, but more pseudo-funk-inspired energy of Rollin. It's a song that embodies the attitude still by being this sort of middle finger to previous generations, seeing the next generation as the one to save the world from the generational excess and sort of like wanton disregard for the status of the planet and choosing the kids to be the saviors instead of doing it themselves. I really love Camilo Ricciotto's hook on this song. It kind of helps just sort of carry those cathartic verses with just a really nice sound. There's a wind down at the end of that song that I used to sort of help transition into this sort of three-song sandwich of like Feels Alright, .xxx, and Border in My Heart. Feels Alright and Border in My Heart are these sort of like intense use of like a loud soft dynamic to get like really aggressive. You know, Border in My Heart is a politically charged song, which while if we were theorizing this dropping in 2021, it would still feel like Trump's presence would still very much echo, and they still do in 2023 and now, obviously, which makes components of this of Placement in particular age a little better, given it was still like wrapped up in post-Trump anger. But like .xxx in the middle sort of takes that energy and sort of uses the swagger that Intention sort of has with that energy, and sort of dances in the middle of these two more chaotically driven songs that then sort of mellow out by the end of the sandwich. The Paper Nihilist following the sandwich, a sort of after outrage stoic realism. Like, it's still a bleak song and it has more the energy of .xxx, but it is a sort of firmer pivot into a mellow realm that I sort of dance within the record with it in the following couple of songs. Going into Best Friend, The Floor, a song that sees the protagonist at a low point, emotionally feeling just empty and rotting. It's a feeling that personally I've been feeling in some instances in recent weeks, and it's just a nice sort of, again, mid-tempo sort of mellow moment in the record that I wanted to have the listener stew in. You know, there's a lot of energy going all around in this, and I wanted to have this pocket of just like real self-evaluation and catharsis. You know, from there I slow it down even more with No Complaints, No Conversation. A song that sort of feels like one hearing the POVs above him as rotting on the floor continues to happen. It has this pivot into looking more at a relationship lover theme that crops up in some loose ideas before this, but gets more pulled to the front on there. It's honestly another one of those songs I brought back into the track listing from Complaint to sort of, one, give another one of the pseudo shifts in ideas that Watsky was doing on there a place in the sun. It kind of fit the very mellow vibe of Best Friend, The Floor, and it has this sort of ramp up in energy throughout it amidst the mellow ideas that I think helps pivot into aw shit. Plus the piano organ lead on that acts as a nice sort of like stylistic shift, reintroduction to the lively sounds from Intention. Aw shit could even be seen as the moment where he gets up off the floor to keep his swagger chugging forward. It's honestly a moment I wanted to help introduce another sort of like payoff moment for some of the planting earlier on, which is something that .xxx did, and I forgot to mention in that song section, before shifting back into a little more of a mellow but still booming moment with Mile Away. Another really good collaboration from this era that I wanted again to act as a sort of more pop-centric, huger pivot that keeps the sound and liveliness from Intention still at the center. While it's the penultimate track on Intention, it's actually sort of the catalyst for the real last stretch of the record that happens following it, because from there I take that booming largeness and transition into one of the longer stretches from this era, Dreams in Boxes. You know, I use the booming mellowness to fade out into more intimate beginnings that evolves across the track listing to act as this sort of like last act introduction, you know, the third act reel kicking in, as it were. It's a moment where Watsky sort of deconstructs some of the ideas in a still very poetic manner, while maybe not being, again, my favorite moment from the era, one that I think, when pulling together these three records, feels more necessary than any other component. Sure, it maybe could be reined in a little bit, and it meanders in some of its weirder motifs, but at its core, it is indicative in some moments to what the sort of POV Watsky's writing with gets to have its, like, big moment. You know, there's moments of, like, self-reflection, moments of scene painting. There's a lot going on in Dreams in Boxes, and it feels like the response to some of the emotions felt on Mile Away. It also acts as a nice beginning of this last act before the theme of the last act comes in with Whitecaps. One of the few moments from Complaint that I actually kept from the jump because of its sounds. It has this anthemic build to it of welcoming in this new world of, you know, it has this siren song intro. It has this siren song intro of Watsky, you know, asking for the women and children to go first to send off into the new world. It carries the more laid-back energy from Dreams in Boxes, but adds a little more intensity and scale to it that I use throughout the last stretch of the record, because from there I go from Fool For, the sort of response to Dreams in Boxes of sorts, another sort of back to the back and forth happening. It's another collaboration with Camilla Carriccio that I think also comes together really fucking well. She plays a good other side to the conversation Watsky's trying to write about. It even sort of helped use that scope planted in Whitecaps to pivot into the more full sound of Fool For, because it's not necessarily as grand as that song, but it helps ground some of the grandness that Watsky's written with throughout some of the other songs on this, and keep it real to, like, the back and forth, you know? And from that moment I go into where Complaint opens with Welcome to the Family as Watsky's last response to Fool For in this back and forth, welcoming this person to their love, their family, you know, of sorts. You know, through the act of, like, grounding through Fool For, this love really starts to burgeon, and, you know, Watsky's opening the door on this song. A song that I thought was fine when it came out, and it's, again, one of the other Complaint songs that I kept initially, because I think it's a decent, catchy-ass jams. I knew it was going to be later on the album because of the Nothing Like the Last Time song using a line from that throughout it. And I wanted to have it be this penultimate moment before To Feel a Little Less Alone in This World closes the album out proper. It's the actual outro to the deluxe version of Intention, and really is just an outro of sorts, but given the love story of sorts comes to a resolve, and it's the real driving force to reining in the mood and having this character shift throughout the POV of the writer, aka Watsky's writing on here. It's a nice sort of, like, ending to some of, like, the more lively personal touches that the album has going on with like the moments with the band and the crowd. It's a nice sort of resolve to it all that I use to close out this Redacted. And that's my version of complaint, placement, intention. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you even like these albums? Let me know those in the comments down below. If you'd like to listen to my version of these albums, it is linked in the description with a YouTube and Spotify link. I will have a second Redacted this month to be December's Redacted, given that this was supposed to be November's. I'm sorry that it's even dropping later than I intended. I've got a fun video dropping tomorrow. Hopefully you're excited for that. Hopefully you like this. I'm going to go. Thank you again so very much for watching. I've been Viral Rack. You guys will get days, lessons, situations, and I'll see you another day.